The transport truck rumbled to a stop at the edge of Fort Asher, a granite fortress carved into the Colorado cliffs. The morning air cut sharp as a blade, and Elena Reyes stepped down with a worn duffel bag over one shoulder and an old rifle case in her hand. Her boots were scuffed, her jacket faded, and her presence went unnoticed by the group of younger recruits filing off beside her. Their gear gleamed under the pale sun. Brand new tactical vests, top-of-the-line semi-automatics, scopes that cost more than her entire salary. They moved with the swagger of men who had something to prove. Elena didn't. She paused near the range and watched the wind flag snap sharply, already calculating its drift in her mind. Her fingers instinctively brushed the spine of the leather notebook in her coat, thick with hand-drawn charts and equations no one had ever cared to see. A voice sliced through the morning calm. "Hey, Grandma, what museum did you dig that thing out of?" The laugh came from Brent Maddox, a recruit from Texas with a cocky grin and a flawless buzz cut. He nodded toward Elena's rifle case with a smirk. "Seriously, that thing got Wi-Fi, or does it run on nostalgia?" A few others snickered. Elena didn't respond. Silence had always been her shield. She just kept walking. At roll call, Captain Nolan Davis, the lead instructor, scanned his clipboard. When he reached her name, his brow furrowed. "Reyes. Support staff transfer." "No, sir. Sniper candidate." He looked her over. Her age, her fatigues, the decades-old gear. "Right," he muttered, but his tone said otherwise. "We'll see." The rest of the day hammered the message home. Speed was everything at Fort Asher. The motto painted across the barracks wall in bold stencil read, "First shot, fast shot, last shot." Everything she had learned about wind, patience, breath control felt like an outdated myth. During equipment inspection, Sergeant Marcus Reed, the range master, picked up her bolt-action rifle like it might fall apart. "This thing even fire?" he asked loudly. More laughter. "Yes, sir. Maintained it myself for 15 years. 15, he blinked. "How old are you, Reyes?" 34. A hush fell around them. Most recruits were barely 20. Elena had spent over a decade in logistics, earning this slot the hard way, with perfect marksmanship scores, not politics or privilege. That night, as she unpacked in the barracks, Elena overheard Brent laughing with his buddies. $10, says the male clerk washes out by Friday. Probably got in here on accident. I'll start calling her male clerk. The nickname stuck like gum on a boot. Even instructors started using it behind her back. Still, she said nothing. She listened. She studied. She watched every flag, every rifle malfunction, every flinch during breath holds. She knew something they didn't, something that couldn't be taught in a week or bought with daddy's money, something that mattered when lives were on the line. But none of that would save her from what came next. The first live-fire test was scheduled at dawn, and the range didn't care how carefully you aimed, only how quickly you pulled the trigger. The cold wind off the cliffs made the range flags dance as the recruits lined up at the firing line the next morning. Elena stood at lane 11, her breath calm, her body steady. Around her, the other candidates adjusted their sleek rifles and high-end optics. Some rolled their necks like boxers before a fight. Elena simply flipped open her notebook, scanning her notes one last time. Captain Davis's voice cracked through the loudspeaker. "Shooters, you have 60 seconds per target. Speed and accuracy. Both or neither. Begin on the whistle." Elena crouched beside her bolt-action rifle. The walnut stock creaked softly beneath her cheek. It was old, yes, but it fit her shoulder like a second skin. She had spent years learning its every nuance, every breath of recoil. It wasn't fast, but it was true. The whistle blew. Brent Maddox's rifle barked like a machine gun. He was already on his third target before Elena fired her first. She exhaled slowly, reading the crosswind, factoring the elevation, adjusting for drift. Crack! Her first shot hit dead center. Then she chambered another round, slower than the semi-automatics, but no less deliberate. She moved with the calm precision of a surgeon. One by one, her bullets found their marks, clean, tight groups dead center on the targets. But 60 seconds passed faster than she'd hoped. By the time the final whistle blew, Elena was still adjusting for her 11th shot. Captain Davis's voice rang out. Cease fire. Range is cold. Around her, rifles clattered as the others stood, their faces a mix of relief and arrogance. Brent turned with a smirk. Hey, Grandma, need a calendar to go with your clock? Elena ignored him. Sergeant Reed walked the line, clipboard in hand. When he reached Elena's targets, he stopped. He stared. 6 targets completed. All bullseyes. Groupings tighter than anyone else's by far. But she had only completed 10 of the 12 required shots. Reyes, he called out. Outstanding precision. But you failed to complete the course of fire within the time limit. That's a no-go. She stood in silence, hands folded, her notebook tucked under one arm. Around her, snickers buzzed like flies. Brent's performance, on the other hand, had been a mess of scattered impacts. Several shots hit only the outer rings. One target wasn't engaged at all, but he had finished on time. Candidate Maddox. Passing score, Davis announced. Good speed management. Elena's jaw tightened. As they marched back toward the barracks, the whispers began to build. She's too slow. Can't hang with the real shooters. Maybe logistics was more her thing. That night, the final blow came. A folded note sat on her bunk, transfer orders. Effective immediately, she was reassigned to armory support. No chance to retest. No discussion. Just a clinical dismissal on unsigned letterhead. Elena sat on her bunk, her rifle case at her feet. She unfolded the orders, read them once, then slid them into the back of her notebook beside the wind charts and trajectory tables. Outside the barracks, laughter echoed from Maddox's crew. Hope she doesn't scratch my scope while she's cleaning it. Someone leave a mop for the male clerk? Elena didn't respond, but something in her had hardened. She hadn't come here to impress anyone. She came to change something. They just didn't know it yet. The armory sat at the far end of Fort Asher, quiet, windowless, and always cold. The clang of steel and the smell of oil replaced the echo of gunfire. Elena reported at dawn as ordered, her notebook in her jacket and her pride buried deep beneath a layer of discipline. Master Sergeant Edwin Hale, a gruff man with a voice like gravel and eyes that had seen too many deployments, met her with a slow nod. So you're the sniper washout? Yes, sir. 34 and still shooting tighter groups than any of these twitchy kids. I read your scores. Elena said nothing, unsure whether it was a compliment or another jab. You shoot straight, Reyes. Just not fast enough for the brass. But down here, that doesn't matter. Here, we fix what they break. He handed her a cleaning kit and gestured to a bench lined with rifles. Start with Maddox's. He's rough on his gear. Thinks cleaning is for janitors. She opened the case and immediately spotted the problem. The bolt was scraped, misaligned, and the scope 0 was off by nearly 2 inches. Sloppy. Dangerous. Predictable. Every day that followed settled into a rhythm. Rifles in the morning. Charts in the afternoon. Mockery whenever Maddox and his crew stopped by to drop off their weapons. How's our little armory angel today? He'd say with a smirk. Careful not to sneeze on my optics. Elena responded with silence. But she began tracking every issue she found. Trigger stiffness, scope drift, bolt lag, ammunition inconsistencies. She documented everything in her notebook. The same notebook they all still laughed at. And, quietly, she fixed them. She calibrated scopes, replaced springs, and adjusted tension screws, ensuring weapons performed better than their owners deserved. Maddox never noticed. He assumed his natural talent was carrying him. But Elena saw what the instructors didn't. Fast shooters who couldn't hold a group under pressure. Rifles that weren't match-ready. Habits formed by speed drills rather than real-world combat discipline. Weeks passed. Then, one evening, Master Sergeant Hale waved her over. I want you to see something. He unlocked a secure cabinet and powered up an old terminal connected to the base's range analytics system. This is internal data. Classified. Don't let it leave this room. The screen lit up with precision matrices and performance simulations. Elena leaned in. What she saw made her chest tighten. Under timed drills, candidates like Maddox performed within acceptable margins. But under simulated stress, their accuracy degraded by 30, sometimes 40%. And in combat scenario overlays, several failed outright. They're fast, Hale said quietly, but they're not steady. Give them fog, wind, or real fear, and they fall apart. Elena scanned the data and began cross-referencing the weapon serial numbers to the logs she kept. Everything lined up. The problems weren't theoretical. They were mechanical, habitual, systemic. And they were being ignored. That night, in her bunk tucked beside the workbench, she made a choice. She began building a parallel report, a combat readiness analysis that connected weapon maintenance records, individual marksmanship data, and simulation results. She titled it Precision Under Pressure, a tactical audit. She worked late into the night, long after the armory was locked. She didn't know it yet, but that report would change the course of Ford Asher's legacy, and it would put a target on her back. The morning after Elena completed her first full draft of the report, Ford Asher woke to an icy fog rolling down from the peaks. Visibility dropped. Tension rose. A cold front was moving through. Fitting, she thought. The entire base was about to feel a different kind of storm. She had barely placed the last sheet in her notebook when Captain Nolan Davis arrived unannounced at the armory. His posture was tight, his voice flatter than usual. "Reyes, I need a word." "Now." Master Sergeant Hale stepped forward. "Captain, she's on duty. You can talk to." Alone, inside the armory's side office, Davis closed the door behind them. The silence grew sharp. "I've seen your access logs," he said. "You've been pulling performance data outside your clearance level." Elena didn't flinch. "All authorized by Master Sergeant Hale for rifle maintenance support." "That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you compiling reports. Unauthorized analysis of classified candidate data." She met his gaze calmly. "Sir, the data shows consistent degradation under stress. Several candidates, including Maddox, are unprepared for real deployment. You're a failed candidate," he snapped. "You don't get to critique people who passed." Elena held her ground. "I'm not critiquing them. I'm exposing a flaw in the training methodology." Davis's face turned red. "You're overstepping. This program runs on results. Speed gets results. You're digging where you don't belong." The threat was clear. Back down or be buried. But Elena wasn't backing down. "Not now. Sir, if my findings are incorrect, disprove them. But if I'm right, and we graduate snipers who crumble under real combat conditions, people will die." Davis stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and left without another word. The air in the armory felt heavier after that. Hale walked back in, rubbing his jaw. "He knows. Keep your head down, Reyes. He's not the kind to forget a challenge." That afternoon, something unexpected happened. As Elena returned from inventory, she found Colonel Dana Wexler, the base commander herself, waiting in the armory, standing beside Hale with her arms folded. "Specialist Reyes," Wexler said, "I've reviewed your report. Every page." Elena froze. She hadn't submitted it. Hale cleared his throat. "I may have passed it up the chain." Quietly, Wexler held up the notebook, open to a page of cross-referenced failure rates under stress. "These numbers are concerning. Maddox's accuracy drops by 40% under simulated duress. And he's top of the class." "Yes, ma'am," Elena said. "And he's not the only one." "I want a full briefing," Wexler said. "Names, rifles, data patterns, projected real-world impact." Elena hesitated. "Captain Davis won't approve. He's already." "This doesn't go through Davis anymore," the colonel said firmly. "You report directly to me." Just like that, everything changed. Within 24 hours, Elena was granted expanded clearance. Her station moved to a back room of the command building, away from the taunts, the laughter, and the sneers. She was no longer the janitor in boots. She was the quiet storm gathering behind closed doors. But visibility came a price. Later that night, as she walked back to the barracks, she found her notebook case sliced open. Pages missing. Her bunk ransacked. Nothing taken, except her data charts from the past 2 weeks. She stayed up all night, rebuilding them from memory. She didn't flinch. She didn't report it. She just turned to a fresh page and wrote in sharp ink. Truth doesn't need permission. In the days that followed Colonel Wexler's directive, Fort Asher's corridors buzzed with invisible static. Elena's presence was no longer laughed at. It was watched. Glances sharpened. Conversations stopped when she entered a room. Her new workspace, a converted records office next to Wexler's command wing, became a quiet war room. She sifted through decades of range analytics and deployment logs. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Top graduates who scored high under time limits had mixed results in the field. In some cases, missed shots had led to unnecessary casualties. In others, shooters hesitated, paralyzed by the lack of a ticking clock, unsure of when to pull the trigger. Adaptive precision, Elena wrote in bold at the top of a clean page. Not speed, not delayed judgment. She documented everything. Cross-referenced weapons logs, wind data, scope calibration inconsistencies. No one else had connected these variables because no one else had ever cared to look. Meanwhile, Brent Maddox swaggered through the base like he was already deployed. Word had gotten around that he would be the star of an upcoming live-fire demonstration for a group of high-ranking visitors from Washington. Even General Adrian Monroe would be attending. "I was born for this," Maddox said to his squad as they reviewed the mock battlefield course. Fast hands, fast kill. That's how real-world snipers survive. Elena watched from a distance, her gaze unreadable. Back in her office, Colonel Wexler entered with a sealed folder. The general arrives Tuesday. The base is putting on a show. Davis has selected the fastest candidates to impress the press. "They'll look good," Elena replied without emotion. "But won't be real." Wexler placed the folder down. "That's why I want you observing from the armory. Quietly. Bring your scope. Bring your notebook. If something goes wrong, I want your eyes on it." A lump rose in Elena's throat, but she nodded. This wasn't about politics anymore. It wasn't about redemption or reputation. It was about safety, about whether someone would die because the wrong metric had been allowed to dominate for too long. Later that evening, as the sun dropped behind the granite ridges, Master Sergeant Hale joined her outside the armory. He handed her a worn cloth bundle. Inside was her grandfather's bolt-action rifle, cleaned, restored, oiled. "Just in case," he said. "The program might not think this relic matters, but I've seen what you can do with it." Elena ran her hand over the grain of the wood. It still felt like home. A few hours later, she stood alone on the firing line, the range empty and silent. She set up her spotting scope and zeroed in on the far targets, just to feel the balance again. The wind danced lightly across the top of the hill, 3 miles per hour left to right. Just enough to matter. She opened her notebook, flipped to a blank page, and wrote, "Demonstration risk assessment." Then she listed variables. High-pressure audience. Time targets. Scripted weather. Candidate. Maddox. Equipment. Semi-auto. Recent trigger issue. Psychological factor. Overconfidence. Emergency response. Untested. At the bottom of the page, she wrote in careful script, "If the wrong person pulls the trigger at the wrong time, someone won't walk away." The base was preparing for a showcase. Elena was preparing for a crisis, and the two were about to collide. Tuesday arrived beneath a cloudless sky. A convoy of matte black SUVs rolled through Fort Asher's front gate, their tinted windows hiding some of the most powerful figures in the military. General Adrian Monroe, stern-faced and sharply dressed in her service uniform, stepped out surrounded by aides, Pentagon officials, and a 2-person documentary film crew tasked with capturing the success of the sniper program's next generation. Everything had been rehearsed down to the last detail. The grounds had been scrubbed, range targets freshly painted, and the schedule adjusted to ensure wind conditions remained mild during the main demonstration window. Elena watched the spectacle unfold from inside the armory, just as Colonel Wexler had instructed. She wasn't on the list of participating personnel, but she had been given silent authority to observe, armed only with her spotting scope, her notebook, and the restored bolt-action rifle that now sat beside her, perfectly cleaned but holstered. From the crowd, Maddox looked like a poster soldier. Perfect posture, polished gear, confident smile. He gave the cameras exactly what they wanted. The general walked the course perimeter with Captain Davis, nodding at his explanations as the selected shooters demonstrated rapid engagements across multiple targets. "Remarkable improvement in training efficiency," she said, watching Maddox drop 3 targets in under 8 seconds. We're cutting sniper readiness time nearly in half. Davis grinned, and increasing output by 30%. It's the future, ma'am. But Elena's eyes weren't on the stopwatch. Her attention was locked on rifle behavior, shoulder recoil, scope response, and post-shot grouping patterns. And what she saw made her scribble quickly into her notebook. Maddox, too fast on chamber reset. Shots dragging left. Control degrading. But no one else noticed or cared. At noon, the second phase began, the stress engagement simulation. Smoke generators were activated, layered combat audio played through hidden speakers, and candidates were instructed to engage pop-up targets in an environment mimicking chaos. It was meant to showcase adaptability under pressure. But Elena knew better. Through her scope, she watched carefully. Wind speed had ticked up unexpectedly, swirling erratically over the mid-range targets. Smoke drifted differently than it had in rehearsals, creating visibility blind spots. Some targets rose out of alignment. One appeared earlier than scripted. Elena froze. A target at 600 yards had popped up out of sequence, and it wasn't marked with the standard orange border. Her breath slowed. She adjusted her scope and scanned the area beyond the faux enemy figure. What she saw made her blood run cold. A maintenance worker in standard base overalls was crouched 50 yards behind the target, barely visible through the smoke, completely unaware of the live exercise in progress. He was retrieving equipment that hadn't been cleared before the demonstration. And from Maddox's position, it looked like a live enemy silhouette. Elena grabbed her emergency radio and tried to raise range control. Static. The base had jammed communications temporarily as part of the simulated realism. She switched frequencies. Nothing. Across the range, Maddox reloaded and locked onto the 600-yard target. His finger moved toward the trigger. Elena's heart hammered. She recalculated instantly. Rifle angle, wind speed, distance, bullet drop. She knew Maddox's limitations. She knew the rifle's drift. She knew the consequences. There wasn't time to yell. No one would hear. And even if someone did, no one else saw what she saw. She reached for her grandfather's bolt action, chambered around, slid into position at the window. Through her scope, Maddox's silhouette sharpened. She didn't aim at the worker. She didn't aim at Maddox. She aimed at the only spot that mattered, the receiver of Maddox's rifle. A 6-inch target, at 350 yards. In motion, she exhaled once. Just once. Crack. The bolt echoed through the range like thunder over glass. Maddox's weapon jerked in his hands, sending his own shot wide into the dirt far from the target. He staggered backward, confused, staring at his disabled rifle in disbelief. The demonstration froze. The cameras turned. Officials shouted. Officers scrambled to respond. And at the armory window, Elena Reyes lowered her rifle with calm precision. She had taken a shot that was never supposed to happen. Not in the demonstration. Not on this day. Not from someone who'd been told she didn't belong. But it was the only shot that mattered. The silence after the gunshot was total. Even the smoke seemed to hesitate in the air. Across the demonstration field, General Monroe turned slowly toward the armory, her face unreadable. The gathered staffers and media crew stood frozen, their eyes darting between Maddox, now holding a dead rifle, and the observation tower where the unauthorized shot had come from. Captain Davis's voice burst over the radio, sharp and livid. Who fired? Who the hell authorized that shot? But the answer had already begun walking across the gravel. Elena Reyes, in her scuffed boots and faded uniform, stepped out of the armory, her rifle cradled safely across her chest, barrel angled down. She walked with deliberate calm through the smoke, the gravel crunching under her feet, toward a row of stunned instructors and wide-eyed recruits. Maddox was still inspecting his weapon. The casing was intact, but the receiver was fractured, struck directly between the housing pins. Not a scratch on him, but the weapon was rendered completely inoperable. It would take hours to realize how impossible that shot had been. "Ma'am," Elena said as she reached the general. The pop-up target at 600 yards was not a simulation. It malfunctioned. There was a maintenance worker directly behind it. If Maddox had taken a shot, she didn't finish the sentence. Colonel Wexler appeared beside them, her expression grave. "We confirmed it, ma'am. One of the maintenance crew was in the field. Not cleared. Wrongly scheduled." She handed over a small portable tablet with the overhead drone footage. It clearly showed the silhouette of the worker kneeling behind the unmarked target, completely unaware of the danger. General Monroe said nothing for a long moment. Then she turned to Captain Davis. "Captain, what safety protocols were in place to prevent this exact kind of failure?" Davis stammered. "We had ranged jamming protocols active. Simulated combat immersion. This wasn't supposed to, and yet it did," the general snapped. "And only one person reacted in time." She turned back to Elena. "That was your shot?" "Yes, ma'am," Elena said quietly. "I aimed for his rifle." "Not him," Wexler added. She made that judgment in less than 3 seconds. No hesitation. No panic. Maddox, still holding his ruined weapon, looked at Elena with wide, disbelieving eyes. "You hit my gun," he said, his voice almost childlike. "Not me." Elena nodded. "You would have hit the worker. Your scope was dragging left, and you were rushing your breathing." All eyes turned to her now, the woman who had once been laughed out of training, nicknamed the male clerk, dismissed as too slow. No one was laughing now. Back in the command building, a full inquiry began within the hour. Reports were pulled, drone footage analyzed, system logs examined, and everything pointed to the same truth. Elena had prevented a tragedy the program wasn't prepared for. But the real shock came next. At Colonel Wexler's instruction, Elena's precision under pressure report was presented to the general and the entire evaluation board. For over an hour, Elena walked them through her findings, side by side with confirmed cases of prior deployment failures by graduates who had scored high in speed-based evaluations. Charts, simulations, real-world fatalities that could be traced to premature trigger pulls or shots fired without full assessment. When she finished, the room was silent again. But not out of fear this time, out of realization. Captain Davis spoke last. "Specialist Reyes failed to meet the timed qualifications of our program." "That hasn't changed." General Monroe stood slowly. "No, it hasn't. But what has changed is our understanding of what matters when lives are on the line." She faced Elena. "You stopped a fatal shot. You diagnosed a system flaw. And you did it after being thrown out by that very system." 8 officers stood ready to escort her out, but the general raised a hand. "Effective immediately, Specialist Reyes is reinstated as a sniper candidate, and she'll serve as advisor on a full redesign of our sniper training doctrine." "Colonel Wexler, see to it." Elena didn't speak. She couldn't. Her throat was tight. The notebook in her hand felt heavier than any rifle she had ever carried. Later, as she returned to the armory to gather her things, she passed Maddox in the hallway. His usual swagger was gone. He looked at her, not with contempt, not even with apology, but with something deeper. Recognition. "That shot," he murmured. "I couldn't have made it." Elena met his gaze. "You might one day, but only if you stop chasing time and start learning what it costs." She left him standing there, holding a broken rifle and an ego more fractured than steel. The range would never see her the same way again. But it was only the beginning. Elena's name appeared again on the roster the next morning. Not in the support section, not under armory detail. This time, it was listed beside a title no one had ever expected to see. Specialist Elena Reyes, Candidate and Tactical Advisor. Her return to the sniper school was met with stunned silence. Recruits whispered. Instructors exchanged looks. No one spoke to her directly, but all eyes tracked her movement. The motto once painted across the barracks wall, "First shot, fast shot, last shot," had been painted over overnight. The wall now stood bare, waiting. Elena stood in front of it for a long time before entering the classroom. Colonel Wexler had arranged a full-scale overhaul of the training curriculum. Elena's precision under pressure report was the new foundation. Shooting drills were redesigned. Time limits were replaced with scenario-based engagements. Recruits were now evaluated on win calls, ethical decision-making, judgment under stress. It was a revolution, and revolutions rarely happen without resistance. Captain Davis didn't take the changes well. Though he no longer had full control over the program, his authority remained embedded in the school structure. He sat in on every new class session, arms folded, jaw locked. He didn't speak to Elena, not directly, but his disapproval was constant, carved into every glance. The tension rippled through the school. Some instructors refused to adapt. Others feigned support while undermining Elena's sessions. Targets were swapped without notice. Practice ranges altered. One day, her notebooks went missing from the tactical planning room. They were found later, soaked, torn, and stuffed behind the water heater. When Elena brought it to Wexler, the colonel gave her a tired look. You've changed the direction of a system that was never designed for change. This was always going to be a fight, but not everyone resisted. A new recruit, Private Jamie Lynn, a quiet, methodical shooter barely 20, began showing up early to Elena's sessions. She took notes religiously. She never tried to be the fastest. She asked questions most others didn't. Elena saw herself in Jamie. The same silence, the same patience, the same way she studied the wind, not just the target. You ever get tired of proving you belong? Jamie asked one evening after class. Elena looked up from her charts. I stopped proving a long time ago. Now I just do what has to be done. Jamie nodded and returned to her scope. That moment stayed with Elena. Later that week, she received a package from Master Sergeant Hale. Inside was a custom patch. Right shot, right time, every time. Below it, a single word, instructor. With General Monroe's backing, the new motto was approved, and Elena was formally promoted to lead instructor of the newly formed Adaptive Precision Sniper program. The wall that once mocked her now bore her legacy. Still, the transformation wasn't complete. Davis called a closed-door meeting with Wexler. You're replacing a proven curriculum with theory, he argued. This base used to produce fast killers. Now we're producing philosophers. Wexler's reply was cold. We're producing survivors. That's the difference. But behind her firm tone, Wexler knew what Elena knew. If they didn't demonstrate results soon, the reform wouldn't survive the year. They needed proof. Not just one perfect shot, not just one brave moment. They needed a generation of soldiers who could carry this doctrine into real-world missions and bring people home alive. And so, the next phase began. Live-fire trials. Not rehearsals. Not demonstrations. No media. Just war simulations designed to break even the best. Elena stepped onto the range beside her new recruits, notebook in hand. One by one, she coached them through failure, through wind, through fog, through doubt. And slowly they improved. Even Maddox returned. Stripped of ego, he arrived early. Stayed late. Started carrying a notebook of his own. It was thicker than Elena expected. One night, she found him alone at the range, firing slow, methodical shots under heavy fog. No stopwatch. No audience. Just him and the wind. He looked over. That shot you made on my rifle still haunts me. Not because I missed, but because you didn't. You were never supposed to be perfect, Elena said. You were supposed to learn. He nodded. Then keep teaching. As the sun dipped behind the Colorado cliffs, Elena stood on that range, the same place where she was once told she didn't belong. Now, it was hers to shape. 6 weeks into the restructured program, something shifted at Fort Asher. Recruits were quieter, more deliberate. The rush was gone, replaced with calculation, timing, restraint. Where once Maddox had fired 10 rounds in under a minute, he now took 2 minutes for 5 shots, and each one landed where it mattered. The final week of training arrived with its own kind of gravity. Live scenario evaluations. Unlike the simulations of the past, these were designed to mimic the unpredictability of real combat. Each candidate was assigned a scenario drawn from archived field operations. Urban rooftops, hostage standoffs, distant targets under camouflage. No two tests the same. Elena spent days overseeing every detail. She reviewed terrain models, wind conditions, even the psychological setup of each scenario. Her name was on this program now. If it failed, she failed. Wexler watched silently as Elena briefed her candidates on their final operations. Don't just shoot when the target appears, Elena said. Shoot when the threat is confirmed. When the wind agrees. When your heartbeat is slower than your breathing. If you shoot too early, someone innocent could die. If you shoot too late, your team could. This isn't about being first. It's about being right. Each student nodded, but Elena's eyes were on Jamie Lynn, the youngest in the group, quietest, best grouping scores in the last 3 evaluations. She hadn't missed a single win call. Maddox, standing beside her, looked at Elena and said, "We got this, instructor." And then, before Elena could respond, a base alarm blared. Real-world deployment notice. Classified mission, forward recon. A high-value military target in eastern Afghanistan had gone dark. Communication loss. 2 reconnaissance teams overdue. New orders were issued. Fort Asher's top 3 candidates were to deploy immediately as embedded overwatch for a recovery unit. Wexler read the order once. Then again. "They want our best," she said softly, "to prove the new system works." Elena stared at the names on the manifest. Jamie Lynn, Brent Maddox, and another recruit named Soren, sharp and consistent, but not yet truly tested. "This isn't just training anymore," Wexler said. "It's validation, or discreditation." General Monroe signed off the deployment within the hour. By sunset, the 3 snipers and a 5-man recovery team were en route. For the first time, Elena wasn't going with them. She wasn't in the field. She wasn't holding the rifle. She was back at Fort Asher, waiting. For 3 days there was silence. Then, at 3:12 a.m. on the 4th day, Elena's secure terminal blinked. A single encrypted message. Target zone compromised. Windstorm ongoing. No visual. Threat unknown. Maddox rifle down. Lynn holding overwatch. Elena's stomach sank. Her hands moved automatically, logging into the systems, pulling satellite data, wind projections, target layouts. A few minutes later, the message updated. Lynn requests judgment clearance. No shot timer. Wind cross at 6 miles per hour. Target may be hostile. Range 760 yards. Civilian proximity 30 meters. Elena stared at the screen. There was no way to help her. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Take your time, Jamie. Breathe." At 3:19 a.m., the feed updated again. Target neutralized. No civilian injury. All team members accounted for. Then, a short personal message arrived through secure line. Instructor Reyes. "I took the shot. Slow. Calm. Certain. Your notebook saved lives. Thank you." Elena didn't cry, but she sat back in her chair, letting the weight of it all settle into her bones. This wasn't theory anymore. Her doctrine, right shot, right time, had just proven itself in a place where failure meant death. When the team returned 3 days later, they were changed. Not hardened, not arrogant, just steadier. Their eyes were clearer, their silence deeper. Jamie approached Elena first, holding out a gift. It was a notebook, identical to Elena's. Inside were pages of hand-drawn calculations, wind charts, terrain diagrams, and the final page held only 6 words. Your way was the only way. Wexler held a ceremony that night. There were no medals, no cameras, just the base's internal staff and the full graduating class. And for the first time, Maddox stepped onto the stage, not as the fastest recruit, but as a survivor who had learned the value of patience. Elena was last to speak. She didn't offer a speech. She simply walked to the back wall of the range, where the new motto had finally been painted in white block letters. Right shot, right time. Every time, she touched it once, and smiled. The cold wind that swept across the Fort Asher range was the same one that had greeted Elena Reyes the day she arrived. Boots cracked, rifle case worn, and silence her only armor. But everything else had changed. The barracks now echoed with the careful rhythm of measured breath, not bravado. Cadets no longer boasted about time. They asked about terrain, about drift, about judgment. Instructors had begun to reorient entire core structures based on precision-first philosophy. And the motto on the wall wasn't just paint anymore. It was lived. Every day, Elena stood at the edge of the firing line, hands behind her back, watching the newest candidates begin their wind-reading exercise. She didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. The method was in motion. Colonel Wexler approached from behind. "Pentagon called again," she said, her tone even. "They want to roll your model across all advanced sniper schools by next year." Elena gave a small nod. It's not my model anymore. It started with you. There was a pause between them. The kind that doesn't ask for acknowledgement. Just respect. Wexler handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a transfer order. Not for demotion, not for reassignment, but promotion. Defense Department advisory role. Washington. She would oversee implementation of adaptive precision across every major U.S. sniper training facility. You'll be building from the top now, Wexler said. Not just from the mud. Elena glanced at the recruits lining up their first shots. Jamie Lynn among them now stood at the front. Not because she was loudest, but because others naturally followed her lead. And Maddox? He had become a peer instructor assigned to incoming recruits. His swagger had faded into quiet professionalism. Elena had found him one evening reviewing a new recruit's win charts, his corrections gentle, his words exact. Before accepting the transfer, she visited one last place on base. The memorial wall, a black slab of stone at the rear of Fort Asher, engraved with the names of fallen snipers from operations around the world. She ran her fingers along the cold surface until she found a familiar name. Corporal Diego Reyes, her brother. The reason she picked up a rifle. The reason she never rushed a shot. The reason she never stopped when others told her to quit. She whispered to the stone, "You weren't forgotten. Your death taught me what no doctrine could." Then she opened her notebook to the final page and wrote one last entry. Sometimes the fastest person pulls the wrong trigger. Sometimes the quietest person sees what no one else does. And sometimes the only way to hit the target is to wait. As she stepped away, she noticed something new near the foot of the wall. A patch, carefully placed, stitched with white thread. Right shot, right time, every time. She turned to leave the range for the last time, her bolt-action rifle in one hand and her notebook in the other. But her story wasn't ending. It was being carried forward, in the hands of every soldier who now knew that pulling a trigger was the last step, not the first. Back in her quarters, a message blinked on her terminal. Subject, Field Report, Adaptive Precision Trial Deployment. Instructor Reyes. Took the shot at 825 yards. Single round. Wind curled late, but I waited. Target neutralized. Civilian secured. We came home. Tell the next class to trust the wind. And themselves. Lieutenant Jamie Lynn. Elena read the message twice, then slowly powered down the screen. Outside, the sun dipped below the Colorado peaks. The wind carried across the field, no longer howling, no longer rushing. It whispered, measured, steady, enduring, just like the legacy it now carried.